and welcome to the Knighted Ones podcast, episode number 3535, folks. As a reminder, we are the only podcast that features a former UCF National Champion, a former UCF radio host, an infamous rapper, an IG star shooting the breeze talking UCF sports, and this week, unfortunately, we don't have an interview. However, we are working for those. This are the dog days of summer where camp is out. Basketball's over. We still got baseball going, and they're in a run for the NCAA tournament. But largely, it's a little bit of a slower time. So we're going to try to introduce and sprinkle in some of our good friends for interviews, and we still have Utah insider to talk with. And then, obviously we've got a Colorado. So we're going to try to get Neon Dion, but I'm not sure if we're going to be able to pull him since he doesn't even talk to recruits, let alone shows. That being said, let's get this week started. And to start us off, no, bruh.
Hey now.
Oh, we got it. We got it. Wow. You went that? Well, I can't say that because that would be an automatic B. So we're going to leave that alone. I'll put that in the private chat. But welcome back. Thank you for being here. Thank you for keeping us on track and making sure that we have excellent quality even when we're under the water. So appreciate you, bro. Next, let's go ahead and bring in Alan Levin. Alan.
Hey.
Hey.
What's going on, guys?
Bringing the energy this week. I think he had an extra Mountain Dew before he came on.
A couple Mountain Dews, yeah.
Yeah, all right. Like a spider monkey, right? Like a spider monkey. All right, spider monkey. That may be your new nickname. All right, next we've got Ben. What's up, Ben?
What's up?
No hat Ben.
What's up, guys?
Good to see you, brother. And next, we've got Trey Neal. What's up, Trey?
What's up, guys? How you doing?
Good. Yeah. Yours doesn't work like Ben's. Ben's still trying to do
it. It's not doing it.
Not working anymore.
There we go.
There it is. And you got a thumbs up. Fireworks and a thumbs up, Trey Neal, for your intro.
Nice.
Let's see what Josh gets. All right. Last but not least, but always last, Josh Lazar.
You forgive, you forget, but you never let it go. What's up, everyone?
Hey, that was the shortest one yet.
All
Well,
right.
I had to keep it real for K-Dot, and unfortunately, that is probably the most well-known rap lyric in the world at the moment, because, of course, it's off of a cut of Bad Blood by Taylor Swift. So that's why everyone must know who that is.
I forgot you were a Swiftie. I know she released an album this week, but I have not listened to it, and I refuse to until my daughter gets in the car and makes me. So there we go.
I heard they're actually offering a Taylor Swift class at UCF now. So
not at UCF. That's at the Cows. The AAU accredited Cows have.
I could have swore they.
No, UCF has a class.
Yeah.
UCF does too?
Right.
Yep.
Oh my goodness. Why? What's the class about?
It's just about the life and times of
Exactly.
Taylor
No.
Swift.
You said it perfectly there, Josh.
I took tennis as a class at UCF. Come on. I took bowling as a class at UCF. Taylor Swift is fine by me.
Well, we know she's fine by you because you're a Swiftie. We've already established that this
I
week.
wouldn't go that far, but I'm married to one.
Now, see, you could have just said haters gonna hate, and that would have been the perfect intro for that. But all right, let's stop talking about Taylor Swift. She's getting enough pub this week.
Agreed.
And let's get into a little UCF football. As we talked about, it is the off season, unfortunately, and Nober just dipped on us again. He's just so slick with it now. He just dips himself out of the conversation. It's just like, all right, I'm gonna go grab my burrito now. But she's we're getting rid of her. What was it the baseball team had this week? What the ERA, whatever?
the Eras Tour.
Eras Tour, whatever it was.
For ERA, I think that was the goal. Yeah.
Yeah. And we lost that game against Central Michigan. So let's not bring that back again, okay? I'm just going to say that now. But it is the off season, so we won't have as much to talk about. Camp is over. We've watched the spring game. We're now going into portal season in earnest. We've got some news on that we're excited to share with you, and basketball portal news as well. That was positive for UCF, so that's good because we haven't really had much positive portal news for the UCF basketball team, but we do now. So we're excited to talk about that. The world of college football continues to change, and more information is dropping on rules changes and also on how the playoff came to be and how the revenue splits were, and of course the evil empire that is the SEC and the Big Ten. So we'll talk about that a little bit this week. Some of the rules changes are interesting. It's looking more and more like the NFL the further we go along. So let's get into it. Let's start with a transfer portal update. Alan, you're pretty good at keeping up with this stuff, so why don't you start us off there?
Yeah. Since the portal opened back up for this window, we've had mostly outgoing guys so far. I think we already talked about Timmy McClain, but I would say the biggest name that left us was starting safety Nakai Martinez. Surprisingly, left, even though he had a starting spot, but it did look like he was getting pushed out with just the DBs we brought in during the initial window in the fall. And I guess he didn't have the best spring. So I guess maybe the writing was on the wall and he wanted to find another opportunity where he could play. Outside of that, 4 other transfers, 2 wide receivers, Goldie Lawrence, who was with us for a few months, came with over in the fall cycle and decided to leave a few months later. So I guess we are not going to see Goldie Lawrence. Then also Stephen Martin, who's been on UCF's roster now for a number of years, like 3 or 4, he's transferring out. And then 2 other DBs, both from the 2023 class, Jamaric Morris and Jason Ducona, are both in the portal. So that's a total of 22 outgoing transfers for UCF, 10 on offense, 12 on defense, and DB and wide receiver make up the bulk of those transfers, 10 out of the 22. So those are 2 positions UCF will look to kind of restock, which got started there. Kind of pivoting over to incoming transfers, the big news of the week happened yesterday. We landed former Ohio State safety, a 4-star prospect out of high school, Cedric Hawkins. So that was a big name coming out of high school, someone that was recruited by nearly every big school in the country.
Including UCF. UCF was big time there.
Correct. And he played at Cocoa. So obviously a pipeline that we want to open, which we do actually have a Cocoa recruit in our current 2025 class, the offensive lineman Joyner. So maybe we're starting to build a little of a pipeline there, but Cedric Hawkins is coming over. He's 6 foot, 185 pounds. He redshirted for Ohio State last year, so did not play at all. But, someone had a really dynamic high school career, had well over 250 tackles in his high school career, had, I think, about 15 picks in high school. Like I said, someone was recruited very heavily, was rated as a top 50 safety in the nation, a top 60 player in the state of Florida. So this is an exciting get, someone that obviously will be immediately eligible and will have 4 years of eligibility left. So, we've kind of talked about this. UCF has a lot of DBs in the secondary right now. I don't know how it's going to shape out. A ton of transfers, a ton of guys that are just returning from last year. So it'll be interesting to see how Hawkins fits in. But that seems like a big get with a lot of potential and a lot of time left still in college.
Yeah, so there's a lot to unpack from that little segment there, and thank you for sharing all of that. So I'm going to work my way from the bottom to the top. There you go. There's another lyric there for you. Yeah, exactly. And now we're here. So, talking about Hawkins a little bit, and you kind of alluded to it. He's a huge trigger for a lot of the guys that we're recruiting for Cocoa right now. Jalen Boggs being one of them. He's a primary target for us in his position. And there's a few other people that we're looking to flip from other teams based on that commitment as well. So Coco's always got really, really good talent. We've got some connections there with the head coach that's over there right now, former UCF player.
Ryan Schneider.
Yep. Unfortunately, and he's a big UCF proponent. Unfortunately, he's sent a lot of people to UF and UM and FSU, et cetera. So we're really trying to break down the barriers there with Coco, because that program's really strong. It's a feeder program for the region, where a lot of kids are transferring from quote unquote smaller schools to go to Coco to play there. And it's really, really, really dominated that area. So that's exciting. Hawkins, like you said, was a 4-star player, but really he was one of the top DBs in the entire country last year. He was someone we were after, and we were in it for a very long time, ended up going to Ohio State, didn't play, and so decided to come back to UCF. And we've talked about this ad nauseum, where when we recruit, we're not just recruiting for today, we're also recruiting for that transfer portal if that player comes back. So that was really, really good. Now, you mentioned Goldie a little bit here. He was someone that we were in the mix for. He ended up going to FSU. It was a big decision on whether he was going to come here or whether he was going to go to FSU. He came here. And unfortunately with Goldie, this wasn't really his decision to transfer. He reportedly was missing practices, was late to the spring game. And those were some of the same reasons why he didn't do well at FSU and was asked to leave there. So Goldie Lawrence, hugely talented receiver, good size, good skill set, but a lot to learn as far as, what the consistency that you have to have as a D1 power 4 for now athlete. So, I wouldn't look at that as so much of yes, it's a loss of potential at wide receiver. And yes, we're already out there looking for other wide receivers. We've been active in the portal with some big names that are out there and that have come available as well. But it's not as huge of a loss if that's what he's going to bring to the table on the day-to-day with the team. Nakai Martinez, Ben, I don't know if you remember this, but you and myself and Andrew, we were super excited when we got him when we were on Nightline. We waxed poetic about him. Great kid. He kind of started that trend of 4 stars starting to come UCF's way as we geared up for the Big 12. I think everybody, local kid, he helped with the state of Orlando, attempts, and he did a great job in recruiting other people and local talent to UCF during that whole buildup. Unfortunately, I think this is more of a situation where Coach Malzahn said he was going to, after the spring game, have sit downs with everyone and kind of let everybody know where they were at. And he kind of saw the writing on the wall. PFF, his performance was not great last year. It was one of
a good year. Yeah, according to all that. Yeah.
One of the lowest performing safeties there. And, all last season, what were we talking about? The whiffs, right? So he had 30 missed tackles last year. And as a safety, or 30% of his tackles were missed tackles last year. As a safety, you cannot do that, especially as the last line of defense.
Question, with the PFF grades, where did he finish? Because I'm going to be honest, just watching him, he was one of our better safeties, in my opinion.
So he finished 239 or something like that.
I mean, like amongst our team.
I think he was one of lower on our team. He was behind the Middle Tennessee State kid, and he was I would say lower middle of the pack, I would say.
Yeah, so he was in the 50s a lot of times, like 50s to 60s, which 50s is average. And unfortunately, with the program where we're at right now, you can't do average, especially when you're not playing the Big 12 or when you're playing in the Big 12 and trying to compete for championships. So I think it's more about how he developed and the talent that we brought in and the talent that we are bringing in and his ability to get playing time, because we've certainly upgraded. So
in the spring that he was did not have him as a starting safety, and a lot of the first team rotations they're rolling with like Quadric Ballard, Ladarius Tennyson, William Wells, who's been around for a while, but he was not getting first team reps.
Quadric, what number is he?
I don't know off the top of my head.
He
was injured most of
his knee brace last year, right?
He was injured most of last year, yeah. But the year before that, he was a start. He's like a fifth-year senior. He's been a starter for like I want to say 3 out of the last 5 years. So
yeah, but even then, I think some of the talent that we brought in, the Cincinnati guy, the talent that we brought in, we've definitely upgraded talent. So unfortunately for Nakai, he's a little bit smaller for a safety as well, which didn't help him. I mean, when he was trying to tackle Oliver out of OSU, it was interesting to try to. There was a lot of arm tackling going on there, not a lot of and leg tackling, diving at legs.
That was our secondary group.
Yeah, well, he unfortunately, I think it's just a size disadvantage and maybe the way that they were being coached. But Ted Roof doesn't play that game. He's very much about being aggressive, having bigger guys, and
you have to play physical to play for Coach Roof.
Yeah, exactly. So, and people forget, didn't he have like 2 weeks at UCF or a little bit? He was at UCF before 3 weeks at UCF.
Yeah, for O'Leary, and then I think he went to North Carolina afterwards.
Yeah. So, he's done a really good job. We talked about it before on turning defenses around. So we're upgrading talent and size, and we're at the same time, being more aggressive and having more disguise schemes and things like that, more complicated schemes, which will help the defense quite a bit as well. So I just wanted to kind of talk about those few things that were there, but Hawkins is a huge get. A lot of people were after him, even in the transfer portal, and we still managed to grab him. All right. That's our quick minute on, or maybe 8 minutes on the transfer portal update. We've got some rules changes with the transfer portal update we'll talk about later. But for now, let's start with the 2-minute rule. So one of the things that the NFL that we're familiar with was the 2-minute rule in the NFL. So it looks like it was approved for use in college football. So that will now be in place for college games as well. So that'll be a little getting used to when it comes to that. Transfer portal rule change. Anyone can transfer at any time. So no more restrictions on the number of times they can transfer and their immediate eligibility and any of that kind of stuff. So you've got 1-year rentals, guys. We're there.
Oh, I thought you had to be like within good standing academically.
That's true. Like that. You do.
You do have to be in good standing academically.
Let's be real about it.
Which is like what, a 2.0 basically?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You just have to go to class, basically.
Yes.
Well, that depends on if you go to school in North Carolina or not. But yeah, so at the end of the day, it's a situation now where it's 1-year players. So it's basically free agency. And it was interesting because Coach Malzahn talked about the role of a GM now being hired. Yes, it was my version of the frog sipping the tea. It was interesting to hear Coach Malzahn talk about the idea of a general manager for college football. And that's now come into vogue with a lot of different teams. So it's a little bit different. And Coach talked about this. He said it's a little bit different in the NFL version because the NFL version, they're hiring and firing coaches. That responsibility will still lie with the AD. What this person's job is going to be is just to manage rosters and work with the NIL collectives, etc., to do that. One of the other changes for NIL, which is interesting, is that now schools can officially partner with NIL collectives. So in other words, they can pay players through NIL collectives through the school. So the school can, that $70 million that the SEC and the Big Ten will be getting paid, they can demark like 5 million of it from the school from that contract and drop it into an NIL collective and use that to hire players. So, and I say hire because it's exactly what they're doing. That's not NIL. That was not what NIL was supposed to be.
How is this still the NCAA, like the National Collegiate Athletic Association? Like, how is this actually college sports anymore? It's all, I mean,
NCAA is trying to do whatever it takes to prevent them from branching off and becoming what it wants. I
don't even think it's that. I think a lot of this, that we haven't really talked about lately was there's still that NIL lawsuit that's working its way through things, and there's pressure from Congress, and then local states are pushing it. So this is a step towards what it's going to be, which is, schools basically are going to have rules and just be able to pay players directly. So taking that burden out of it. And then I do think that eventually the players are going to not like this because their taxes, they're going to be regulated and more like 1099 employees. Yeah. So it'll still be college
that needs
football.
To happen sooner than later because this is just ridiculous.
I think that's what they're working towards. But they've got so many things on their plate between the playoffs.
Are they not getting taxed on this money?
They're supposed to be.
Assuming they're supposed to be.
I don't know. I'd assume so.
Listen,
they are. They had a big lawyer on ESPN talking about this. They are getting taxed on this stuff. He was talking about. I can't remember when it was. It was like Darren. What's that big sports lawyer? Yeah, he was talking about it on ESPN.
So they're paying like normal taxes.
Mm-hmm.
Some of these
early life.
Goodness gracious!
Early life lesson because tax avoidance. I think too.
I mean, it's something that we talked a lot about a number of years ago when this whole thing came to pass. It was like, man, I hope that they have good advisors in place to really, talk to these athletes.
They probably need to have a CPA. Or accountant that
lawyers.
They got their uncle or their uncle's best friend who's now their NIL agent who's out there. They're good.
They need to.
That was actually something I saw last week for the first time. I mean, I know it existed well before this. It was the first time I saw it on Twitter, or it was somebody where it said it was some sort of announcement. Yeah, X, whatever. It was some sort of announcement that, like, I don't know if the kid was transferring or something, or maybe it was an announcement of NIL deal or something, but it was a college athlete, college football player, and it said through his agent, he said XYZ.
Yeah.
And it's like, that was the first time I just saw that. Like, I saw through his agent. And I think that we call it the transfer portal. I think we call it free agency because we don't know what to call it. But like, free agent. This isn't free agency. This is a free for all, as Alan just called it. I mean, because
it's not a free
agency implies that there's actual contracts in place.
It's not free agency, quite simply.
What?
Yeah,
well,
and that's
even
that's
in the
exactly
NFL,
it. There's no term.
Right. There's no.
You do have. Hold on, Josh. You do have a contract technically every time that you sign up for another year, right?
Not every year. Could you imagine every NFL player able to change what they want to do every single year?
And you could, and it's not even every single year. It could be every 2 months they change it. Like
I was about to say, it's not for a full year.
It's not even a full year. It's like it could be for literally a month. Like they could sign their national letter of intent and go out a few months later. Like it's not like
but the schools have to guarantee one scholarship year every time that they review it. They have to maintain the scholarship.
Whether they're agency, it's a free for all. Yeah, it's like because.
Well, okay. So going back to what I was trying to say before you guys jumped in, they do have a contractual agreement, a year-by-year contractual agreement with the school, whether they honor it or not or transfer. Again, this goes back to what this change is, which is, hey, you can transfer as many times as you want, right? And there's no more restrictions on the number, like you having to sit out for a year if you transfer. So all of that's gone. And, contrary to the NFL, there's no commitment to the team by the player because they can just up and change teams whenever they want because it's pretty much a year-to-year contract from now on. So we were having a conversation in our quote unquote text talk about developing players, and how there isn't going to be a lack of there's a lack of player development. And when it comes to things, what about scheme? What about technique? What about all those things that are taught with the different defenses? You lose all, or offenses for that matter. You lose all that, right? If you're going from a run and shoot type of offense to now a traditional SEC style, pro style offense, the players lose all that. They lose that repetition. They lose, because there's a reason freshmen aren't going to the NFL, right? And the reason for that is they still have to learn. They have to learn the techniques. They have to learn the scheme. They have to understand and be fast enough to make quick decisions. Trey talks about it all the time, right? You as a defense, you need to be able to do the pre-snap read and know what your assignment is and be able to react without thinking. And that goes away if you're not in that system long enough to learn it. I mean, Trey said it himself. The reason he went to Nebraska, controversially, was because he didn't want to learn a whole new system again before he went to the NFL draft process, right? Because he only had 1 year of eligibility left. That makes a whole lot of sense because it takes a minute to learn that. You don't learn it over a summer. You don't learn it even if you are there for spring camp and fall camp.
Than a year before you get comfortable. It's over a year, at least year 2 to get comfortable.
Exactly.
With defense. Offense too, same way. I mean, that's why most of the teams you see that year 1 is kind of just filling out the players, pause, and then just realizing who fits where. It's a lot of basic concept. There's nothing really. It's a lot of vanilla. Year 2 is where you kind of branch out, get a little bit more complex. And yeah, I mean, again, you don't really see guys jumping from the NFL or jumping to the NFL as freshmen because, again, you're 18 years old. It's the physicality of from high school to college is already a huge jump for 99.9% of the players. Trying to make a second jump, like it's different than the NBA. A lot of guys that can do one and done or come out of high school, yeah, there's a physical kind of jump that you have to get acclimated to. But I mean, for example, the LeBron James, Kevin Garnett's, Anthony Davis, like a lot of the one and done guys can kind of have the skill to play in the NBA. They might not have the physicality, but they have the skill. If you don't have the physicality in the NFL, you can't play. It's just that simple. And on top of that,
the NBA, the NBA is a more of a one-on-one kind of thing, right? So you're doing things to set up mismatches for one player versus the other player. Yes, you're doing that on offense, and even defensively, you're trying to, hide your scheme or who's going to blitz or, all that other stuff, right? But at the end of the day,
it's a skill game too. Like Ben even talked about, Kevin Durant couldn't even bench 130, 185.
Yeah,
but he's one of the greatest basketball players we've ever seen.
Yeah, the way that the NBA game has gone over the last 20 years. Yeah. I mean, it's a less physical game than it was in the 80s and 90s when you were actually able to.
Guys would stay 3-4 years in college. Yeah. That's when it was.
Yeah, but going back to the transfer portal, I guess. So this rule obviously evolved from the transfer portal or the transfer rule, changed a number of years ago where you could have one transfer, and then you'd have to sit out if you wanted to transfer again. And because of essentially COVID, the amount of NCAA exceptions that were given out where, you had guys that were transferring 3 or 4 times over the course of their college sports career, that just seemed to become normal. So I guess that's where this new official rule came from. It was just like, hey, we're just tired of giving out all these exceptions, so we're just going to make it a complete free-for-all. And so what's interesting about that to me is that all of a sudden, what seems like it could never happen or seems like kind of crazy a few years ago, they just trickle in and get you used to it. And then eventually it changes again and it doesn't seem as crazy, or at least the established rule doesn't seem as crazy. The whole one, transfer and then you have to sit out. But what happens for instance, what happens in high school sports in Florida, right? Florida is one of the most pro school choice states in the country. And on the athletic side, there's a lot of high schools, especially in South Florida, that kind of take advantage of that on the athletic side.
They're cheating.
Where you see in this, you could watch state championship football games, which always have representation, a huge representation from South Florida, high school teams. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because there will be at least 3 starters on each of those South Florida teams that didn't start the season playing for that school. And so imagine now a future in college football, which is not that far away, where the starting quarterback of the national championship team started out the season on a different team. And that's something that we're now going to have to get used to in college sports, because it's coming to that. And no one can say, oh, no, that'll never happen. It happens in high school right now. And this whole they could just move to any school that they want. There's a number of people 5 years ago that said that would never happen. And so all of this is just a downward spiral that's just going to continue to move forward. And I mean, eventually we're gonna have freaking people changing jerseys at halftime and going to the other team. It's crazy. It's crazy to me.
It is.
But anyways, I mean, I'm glad a lot of people are really happy about the complete. I mean, there's a big difference between player empowerment or athlete empowerment. Them being able to get what they need. There's a big difference between that and what we have today and what we're moving towards in the very near future. It seems like, I mean, it just seems like it's gone too far already, and we're not even on we're on maybe the tail end of the beginning.
I like the rule when you could get 1 free transfer, and then if you did it again, you have to sit out a year.
Right. I mean, to me, it seems like you want to get out of get out of situation, you kind of penalty free. That's great. But
just unlimited transfers is, to me, it's
just no consistency.
It doesn't help the kid either. People think it helps the kid. It doesn't.
Not at all.
Even they always want to compare it to the coaches leaving, and it's a dumb comparison.
Yeah. And we're just talking sports wise. Academically, you can't transfer to some of these schools because some of them are on what do you call them? Trimesters. Some of these schools are on trimesters, some of them are quarters. Yeah, sometimes the credits don't carry over. You become a transfer student. There's so many different loopholes and hoops that you have to jump through, and it's not good for the kid. And I hate kind of just talking about the academic side because we're a sports talking show, but that part is a piece because, again,
hey, listen, they didn't come here to play school, bro. They didn't come here to play school.
To be honest, most of these guys aren't going to play on Sundays. Most of these guys aren't going to play in the NBA. Most of these guys aren't going to play professional baseball. That's just the reality of it. You're already kind of a 1%er playing Division I football. Then it's another 1% to make it into the 1% of the 1% to play whatever professional sport. You have to have, and I get it, you want to strive for it, but you have to have some kind of plan B in a sense. And I don't think the NCAA, that's why I said the NCAA is just doing whatever they can to save the brand of NCAA from just becoming like when you sent the other day, the proposal of everybody branching off to 64. I think that's a real thing unless the NCAA just kind of falls in line to whatever they want. Otherwise, they're just going to say, hey, you know what? Forget the NCAA. We're going to branch off, do our own minor league football. That's why I think they're just going to that's why I think they're gonna be. I think that's why they're obliged.
This is why you gotta watch the YouTube version of this.
We can't say this. This is the lead. That was killer, no, bro. That was great.
But yeah, I think bro. And I think this isn't even really y'all were saying, it's not even really free agency because, like you said, in 2 months, if I don't like it, I can leave. You can't do that in the
NFL. Sport. You can't just do that.
You have to if you sign a 3-year deal, unless the team trades you, you're riding that 3-year deal out, or they cut you. That's it. You don't get to say, "Oh, I don't feel." You can retire, but then you don't get paid. You don't play. That's the only way you get out of it is retire. So like this
like
is
the NIL deals aren't nothing's binding at all. Like I don't
Yeah.
understand the point of a national letter of intent. What's the point? Like they don't need to do that. Like just
no, there's
just
no
like,
point.
all right, I'm
I mean,
gonna play
that's
it.
just to
Well,
drive.
Johnny
that's just
Dawkins proved
talking
that
points.
point.
That's just talking points now. Just hey, we signed this great class. You know, give me my bonus as a coach. That's all it really is for now.
We signed.
Yeah, I mean,
All right.
Yeah, that's
Wow.
the thing. It's like we all laughed when it was I don't know who it was. I think it was even Mikey Williams. You know, I was like, talk to me when he actually plays for the team.
yeah,
Any
exactly.
player now. Talk to me when they actually. I mean, what's the point of getting excited about any recruiting? Like, tell me when they actually get on the field, or actually get on the field. Because if they don't get in the field, they're gone anyway.
They're leaving anyway. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of like what Rob and Ben have been talking about in the chat. We're starting to root for, and it's not the players, you know, that we don't like the players, but we're more so rooting for the universities.
We're rooting
You
for
don't-
the
you don't-
local, man.
You don't get enough time to like grow relationships with them.
Yeah. I mean, shoot, Roger, how I met you and like even Ben and like now you guys was through the time that we got to build relationships with fans. You know, like
For sure.
coming to the I forgot what it was, Fan Fest in August, talking to people after the games, talking to people. Like if we're only here for 6 months and then we just bounce, like it feels like we feel like the NCAA is just Kentucky basketball. That's what college football is. It's just Kentucky basketball. We see you play and then you leave. You know, you can't build any rapport with fans and people like that, in my opinion. I could be wrong.
Oh, I agree.
It's like
I
you
think
got to
there's
start
still-
liking the grad transfers because you know they'll be there for that 1 year and graduate at UCF. Like that's the only one you can guarantee. Really.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. It's like it's actually not like Kentucky basketball because Kentucky basketball, those kids were there for one season, and then they went to the NBA and became great superstar athletes in the NBA. But who do they represent when they were in the NBA? They represented Kentucky, and so that's the thing. It's like who's Matt Lee representing today? Who's Mikey Keene representing today? Like we're not like we don't gain a connection because we don't have the Shaquem Griffins or we don't have the Shaquem Griffins of the world where we're like saying like that guy is UCF. I mean, you have to really.
Hey, hold on. You could have said Trey Neal here. He was on the same team. Oh wait, no, he's transferred.
Well, I was about to caveat it. No, I was about to caveat it in the sense, and this is a legitimate caveat because we do hold certain players who have transferred, and Trey, I would loop me into that group, but like Mackenzie Milton, of course, like ones that make like a true impact, like, and they seem to be UCF lifers, right? But like but nowadays, I'd even say like Trey was Trey was one of the last years where you could actually have that. Whereas like even like I just mentioned Matt Lee, right? Like we view him great 4-year career at UCF and he transferred to go get money. And people can't fault him for that, but by the same token, like the reason why he transferred was a lot different than the reason why Trey Neal transferred. Trey Neal transferred because his coach that he had established such a relationship with, and I don't want to speak for you, Trey, but he went to another school and you only had 1 more year of eligibility left. And who could fault him really for that? Like sticking with a relationship as opposed to a relationship with money is something that people don't relate to. And that's just the way it goes.
100%.
Yeah. So I will say this, when I was at the spring game, and this is something I noticed, but I didn't talk about in previous episodes, you know who had a bigger line between RJ Harvey and KJ Jefferson? Wasn't starting quarterback. It was RJ Harvey.
It was the lifer.
And I think it's the lifer. And I think that's now KJ had his share and a lot of his autograph fans and that type of stuff. But there was a pretty deep line for RJ. And I don't think RJ is going to transfer as well on our talk back, but I think that might be the end of some of that too, because unless you have the NIL to keep the people here and they can transfer every single year. Look, I love the idea of good commerce, but even the NFL doesn't allow this.
Right.
Even the NFL does not allow what is going on here. Now, the other side of that is if all the college athletes start collectively bargaining, then there'll be that will be the give and take. But
at least there'll be some established rules and not this whatever this is. I mean, it's whatever this is.
I'd rather have an established rule than what it is now. Like,
the lack of structure is very frustrating.
Yeah, and I'm a union guy. I've been in multiple different unions. I think there's a very good value. Oh, no, I am. But the reality is, what would you? I think we would all rather have a known than what is going on here.
Yeah,
like some level of known.
There's no rules. There's no rules to the amount of money a kid can make. There's no rules to where he can go. There's no rules. It's just whatever falls in your lap.
I honestly think what this is, and I'll talk about this a little bit when we get into the next portion of the segment, but that NIL contract is out there, and the longer the NIL lawsuits out there, and the longer that goes, that means more plaintiffs for that class action lawsuit that can start getting paid back money. So if they can reduce some of the damages from that along the way until it gets settled, guess what they're going to do? I think that's what you're seeing right now.
Can you briefly explain what the lawsuit is about? Briefly, when it comes to NIL lawsuit, are people trying to get more money, or past people before NIL trying to get money, or what's going on?
They're trying to say that players should be able to monetize themselves off the name, image, and likeness, and that basically the schools and the NCAA has been making money off their backs for however long, right? And so part of that lawsuit is going to be past players who are going to get some sort of recovery there. It won't be that much, Trey. Sorry.
Hey, any money's good money for me.
It'll be $25 and a bag of Bugles. You won't even get Doritos. So
I got like $60 from the NCAA basketball game back in 2004 or whatever, that as part of that original lawsuit. Yeah.
Really?
Oh yeah.
And you accepted that? You should have sued him for more, dude.
You're right.
Man, $60 back then.
What is this?
I'm talking about we got that
like in the 1920s. You couldn't buy a house for $60.
Roger, $60 for me. If you give me $60, oh my goodness.
Hey, I always say, yeah, I'll take $60 right now.
Kidding me?
But yeah,
Ben blew that at Devaney's in one night.
No, this was like recently, dude. Like with the original NIL lawsuit.
Wow,
that was like 2015.
Yeah, it was like more recent than that. It was like,
hey, no, I didn't get
2018 or something.
Come on, man, you gotta get your $60 holler. All right, so now that we've broken down Ben's windfall from
totally.
lawsuit, right? You should also have one for short shorts because I think there might have been some damage there. You could sue them for that too, because at that time they'd not gone to the long shorts yet. So let's see if we can do.
False. That's false. I grew up in the Allen Iverson era.
Well, that's true. 04. Yeah. You're right. Okay. So at the end of the day, bottom line is there's multiple lawsuits. It's not just one. And part of it is the right to unionize and collectively bargain. Part of it is, to be able to get that back money from the schools, how the schools have profited off of that and merchandise sales. And that's why the NCAA game went away for a while and it's coming back now finally. Part of it is how much they should be getting from the schools themselves as a portion of that name, image, and likeness, not just what they're selling to other people, like outside entities, right? So there's a lot of different ones going through, but basically by opening up the floodgates and restricting less of it, there's less cause for players in the current era versus previous eras to say, hey, I've had real damages from this because you restricted me. So that's part of this, because that's on the horizon. It's looming in the next year or two. And, I guess I'll just go ahead and say it. Part of that conversation that's going around with the Big Ten and the SEC is they're going to get hammered on the awards for that lawsuit for the plaintiffs. And so part of the justification that they were using for having a split revenue distribution is that they had a higher burden for that lawsuit than anybody else is going to. So we're trying to say, hey, we need more revenue to offset the burden that we're going to take on because of the
yeah, but we're not going to talk about all the revenue that they gained from those plaintiffs in that lawsuit. Like, I'm sorry, you guys already started way up here because of those players. Like, you don't get to say, oh, future players need to offset.
Hey, they can say whatever they want to justify whatever they want because it worked, right? So, but yeah, so that's that. All right. Now that we've jumped up and down on our soapboxes on that to the point where I think we cracked the soapbox, at least on the top. The next rule change that came out is it's actually been approved that coaches can now talk to players, just like the NFL, where they're going to be allowed to have electronic devices. So more than likely, it'll either be the middle linebacker or safety for the defense, and then the quarterback, obviously, for the offense, where plays will be able to be called. They will have to have a designated dot on the back of the helmet to say that's the person that has that. Also, they're going to cut off the play with it 14 seconds to go. When the play clock hits 14 seconds, they have to cut off communication. They also can have in-game views of on their iPads for the players. As long as it's in-game views, they can't bring outside views from other games while they're playing the game, but they can show it on those iPads on what they're doing. That's also been approved. So a lot of little tweaks that should make things a little easier for communicating. A lot of that has to do with our friend Jim Harbaugh and everything that was going on with the hat camera gate thing, because that they're just trying to find ways to get those in without having to use the cards. So those cards, those big cards that flop and move away, and you have multiple people all around the sidelines doing that, those may go away as those calls are going to be called in. Now, what does that do? It may not go away because, again, with no huddle type offenses and speed offenses, right, that all the players need to know what their role is and what's being called for their particular section. So that means you're going to need the cards, because otherwise you're going to have to huddle up, and they're going to have to get direction from whoever the play is getting called into. So I don't think that'll completely go away, especially for offenses and defenses that rely on speed, like the UCF Fast.
It should go away. I mean,
well, all the other players, if you're trying to get lined up fast,
the only issue really is whenever, like, 2 minute, if you have those 2 minute situations, those no huddle situations. But then, even then, whenever we played teams like that, like a Baylor or a Memphis that just go lightning quick, the calls are basic. The calls are kind of, we almost predetermine them. So if they make a play on the right hash, we'd already know the next call because of where the ball is. If it's in the middle of the field, we know, well, at least I'm just speaking from my experience. We kind of know already where, if the ball's in the middle of the field, if it's on the right hash, if on the left hash, this is how we play the defense. I think that's how you have to be if you play those lightning quick teams. And then 2 minute, most of the time, and this is even Coach O'Leary, we'd send in 2 calls and you'd bounce off of those calls, just flip flop. As long as the person who sets the defense, which most of the time, like you said, Roger, is the Mike or the middle linebacker, and that's who probably will have the green dot, just because everybody can hear him. He's the center. D lineman can hear him, and the DBs can hear him. Other than that, I mean, like you said, it could be a problem. I don't think they get rid of cards year one. I think it kind of phases it out a little bit, just because, like you said, most of the calls are going to be into the quarterback's ear, into the linebacker's ear, and then these tempoed offenses. The offense is basic too. It just operates on speed. It's simple
speed and spacing.
Yeah, speed and spacing. They count the box. If it's a light box, they're running the ball. If it's a heavy box, they're going to throw. Like, that's not really the hard part. And they may have, stuff for just those specific guys. So I don't think it'll completely go away. But I think the days of seeing people look over the sideline and you have 4 cards up and guys with different hats, I think that's going to go away.
All right, so I have a question for you. What's the craziest picture that they were putting up there when you guys were out there on defense that you can think of?
We had a lot of different ones. We had, like, Elvis. We had like a Peter Griffin out there sitting on the toilet. Like we had so many.
And what did that one mean? What did that one mean?
A lot of the stuff were decoys. Like,
I know that.
Yeah. I mean, it didn't mean anything. Truthfully, it was just there because some people would have it up there and they think it meant something, and it wasn't. And we'd be looking at somebody with a red hat give a signal. That's it.
Yeah, no, I know the different color hats mean whoever it is that's wearing that hat for that particular game.
We actually be each quarter. We change each quarter.
Like, oh wow, I didn't know you guys.
We'd have a red hat for we'd have 4 different guys giving signals, and then we have 2 guys holding signs. So 6 people we could make calls from. Most of the times we never did it off the signs because it's hard to just flip signs and just keep the same one up. So we'd go off of the hats, and depending on the first quarter, they'd say, "Hey, we're going off red hat," and it'd be.
Tell me a crazy one, like a crazy image and what it meant.
The defense, we didn't go off of images. We went off of signals. So our images were just decoys. For offense, I don't know. I mean, I didn't play offense. I know they had some crazy ones. Like I know they had one time I think they had like a Coach Verduzco's face like screaming on it, and it meant something. They had like a piece of cheese, which is just like it's a lot of random stuff. And it means stuff. I'm not going to say it now because I remember what it meant. But it's offense is a lot more in depth than defense. Defense, we're just like, look at this one guy. That's what we do. And then Memphis, actually even deeper, they knew our signal. So whenever they would see who was calling, if we had 4 guys and the one guy we're reading is doing this for our defense. If we on defense relay it to each other, we're doing this. They know the guy because they know our signals. So we actually had to call. We had to say it to each other what signals we were running. So we would be, for example, we'd be saying Elvis, 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 but that's not what Elvis meant because they knew our signals. But we were saying it differently, and that was a crazy game. I couldn't believe they knew all of our signals. Whenever we would do it, they would check to the perfect play to beat it.
Which Memphis game was that?
The second one.
On the championship game?
Yeah, that second game. I mean, you can go back.
So the reason why it was 53.
Yeah, you'd see Riley Ferguson. He was actually calling east, east, west, west. Whenever we would call something, whenever we call rain, lightning, which was one of our field blitzes or boundary blitzes, he would call east, east. So the blitz, say the blitz is coming from the boundary. I'm getting football nerdy. If the blitz is coming from the boundary, they would run stretch to the field, so the blitz can't make a play.
Yeah,
right.
And we're weak on that. Weak side, we're weak to the field. So every play ended up our post safety would have to make the tackle 15 yards down the field.
How long did it take?
Make it the tackle, and some plays they break, and that's where a lot of our issues stemmed that first half. Until we were like, Coach Chin, they know our signals, and he's like, "Well, we can go out there and give them decoy signals as long as y'all know what y'all are doing." And everybody's like, "Y'all want to do it?" We're like, "Yeah, there's nothing to lose now. They're scoring every drive, So it was a lot of gamesmanship with that, and we kind of baited them into a lot of plays because we were doing that too.
Is that how you got the interception at the end?
No, the interception was just mano a mano. We sent the house. I had the tight end. That was it. Like it was.
I love that. I love the humbleness. I love the
Trey, you have the tight end. Everybody else were blitzing the quarterback, and if they run it, we should smoke it. If they throw a pass, somebody has to make a play, and that was it. It was me, Kyle Gibson, Mike Hughes, and Neville Clark. We were all 1-on-1, so that's what it is.
It's a pretty good back four. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, and again, we had Richie Grant, Bam Moore. Like we were loaded, man. Antoine Collier, we were loaded.
Man, Bam Moore. Too bad he got injured.
Yeah, he was an NFL guy. He was.
Yeah, he was.
He doesn't get hurt. He's playing on Sundays.
Yeah, 100%. All right. Now that we've talked about the coaches talking in the helmets and signs and Trey's Memphis experience. Let's talk a little bit about the Pac-12. So, we've been talking about it quite a bit. The Pac-12 obviously is no more. There's 2 teams left, and it will officially be a P4. We've been talking about the P4 now ad nauseum. As of August 2nd, came out today, that the Pac-12 will no longer be a power conference. So the schools that play there will be the same level, non-autonomous, because that's how they designate them, teams that will now be counted the exact same as the G5. So that's interesting. I wonder what would have happened had they been able to work something out with the Mountain West to merge. But they're going to, well, you never know. I mean, you never know.
ACC's next.
Oh, I agree. We've talked about that before. I think the ACC is next. I think FSU and Clemson are out soon. So
yeah,
I think that may happen actually as we close out. Now is the quiet time where there's not a lot of limelight on it. You know, there's been some news about the lawsuits. Those are moving forward. So I have a feeling that before we kick off the next season, there'll be something more definitive out there on that. I think there's a lot of negotiating going on right now. So, all right. Next, go ahead.
I was going to say they just were sent to mediation like this week or So I'd love to. It'd be great if there was some finality to that because we all already kind of know where this is going. It's going to end up being a big three. ACC will be picked apart. Hopefully that's when the 2027 look in for Brett Yormark that he tried to slide in there at the only power of negotiation we really had as a Big 12 conference came in. And once that's pulled apart, maybe our shares go up because, well, there's one less mouth. There's 19% less mouths to feed or what that was their percentage or something like that. So it'd be great for this to be finalized. I still think it's going to take a couple of years.
I would say if we get Miami, that might be the case, but they did it on playoff the last 10 years of playoff participation, right? So nobody in the ACC outside of FSU and Clemson participated that I can recall.
Yeah.
So that would all go away, and the shares wouldn't go up unless they demoted some of those to G5 like they did for the Pac-12.
I understand how they did it as a leverage and negotiation tactic, but if those two aren't there, are you saying the rest of the Big 12 wouldn't have made a playoff? Like, see, it's kind of playing around with statistics and numbers, and I understand.
Well, technically, they didn't count Cincinnati's. They even went further than that. They didn't count Cincinnati's, and for the SEC, they also did not count Texas and Oklahoma. So they said anybody who was in the conference at the time within that 10-year span, they didn't give them the credit. If they left the league, they didn't give the league credit for those playoff appearances, but they also didn't give the new league the credit for those playoff appearances either. So basically, like Oklahoma's was just didn't count toward anybody's calculation. So we would have.
Yeah, but that's.
We would have gotten Baylor or not Baylor, TCU. We would have gotten credit for TCU, and I think that's it.
But that's the thing. So you're saying that if those two aren't in this conference, that there would be no one from this conference other than TCU getting in there. I don't like the math that they were trying to play. But again,
they did it on past performance. They did it on past performance, but as you alluded to, and I was getting ready to talk about the article by Ross Dellinger. There was a lot of stuff in there. And one of the things that was mentioned was, Yormark was not happy with how the distributions went, but he did get them to agree to a 2027 look-in case there was more realignment and based on performance. So they can say, and they can say, I get that, but they can say, let's say, in a 12-team playoff, now we've got, we're going to have a Big 12 representative every year, no matter what. It's going to even some of that out, but the play-ins, right? The what do you call it when you're not an automatic qualifier for the playoff?
The +7. But I know what you're saying. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. So basically, at large. Yeah, we all got it at the same time. So the at-large bids, we all know that the vast majority of them are going to go SEC Big Ten anyway. But there's still the ability to kind of balance that out, right? But if there are less teams, as you said, that after the ACC implodes, and it's interesting that he chose 2027 for that because that's not that far away. If some of those teams get relegated essentially to G5 status, then that overall pot that's left over that's not claimed will be bigger. And I'm wondering if they just divvy up the same percentages right? And just divvy up the percentage that the ACC would have had by the percentages that they already established, and then the pocket's a little bit bigger. I don't know. Or if the teams that, do go to the Big Ten or the SEC and the Big 12, they take those shares with them and then they split up the rest. I don't know how they're going to do that, but that's a big part of it. So go ahead, Josh.
Nope. Well, if you want to talk about that article, that was kind of where I think we were going.
Yeah, that was the next thing on the list. So Ross Dellinger put out a really, really, really good article. Actually, today, I believe he put it out. It gave us a preview of the mechanics of what was going on in 2022 as the playoff discussions were happening, right? So if you remember in the Wayback Machine, which was only not even 2 years ago, there was this thing called the Alliance. And the Alliance was the Big Ten, the ACC, and the now defunct Pac-12. And this was when the SEC was really pushing to go to a 12-team playoff, and the Alliance put a stop to it. And these negotiations were actually going on. They were having these conversations the morning that Georgia and Alabama played in the playoff championship and Georgia won. They were having that conversation. The commissioners of the various conferences were having that conversation, and they didn't want to move it forward. And Sankey was so mad that they weren't moving it forward that he actually walked out of the meeting, and nobody could believe it, right? Everybody was trying to put up a front, and they were basically overplaying their hand. And Sankey said, all right, well, if you're doing that, then I'm walking out. So then fast forward. And at that time, one of the challenges that actually would have been in the Big 12's favor was the revenue distribution was more like what it existed today, which is 80% evenly distributed to the Power 5 conferences, right? With 19% going to the G5 and then some independents. What ended up happening now is those revenue splits, as we were just talking about, have changed based on the number of the past performance in the playoff and participation therein. So it actually put us as the Big 12 in a worse situation. We sided with the SEC, and I'm telling you, I told you guys this then. If you listen to Nightline, I feel like, obviously the Big Ten was not going to get left out because of the brands that they have, right? But the Alliance members, all of a sudden the Pac-12's gone and the ACC's on the brink. Thank goodness the Big 12 sided with the SEC on this particular issue, right? Because I think that earned us brownie points and why we may be the third league. Now, going further, now the Big 12 is going to make about 12 to 14 million per team. At that time, Sankey said in this article, he said that there was serious consideration. He was not just, and to use another word, bloviating. Josh, you forgot to put our thread up. But revisiting that word bloviating, he wasn't just bloviating. He was serious about splitting with the current power structure. Thank goodness that didn't happen. The advisory board, now what all of these changes did right before they went into this most recent 12-team playoff negotiation, which was February 2nd. There was a joint advisory board that was formed by the SEC and the Big Ten, which now represents 61 of the 88 last AP Associated Poll champs. They went in together, the Big Ten and the SEC went in with a united front, and their conversation was, hey, we bring them the most to the table, so we should get most out of that. They also brought up the aforementioned NIL burden for the suit that's going to be coming out. And even then, Sankey quoted that he didn't view them having to stay together. Everybody went into that meeting saying we have to stay together. He said that they didn't have to stay together. So it was this close to actually having a separation. We were all talking about it. We were all speculating about it. But, we didn't think it had to happen that quickly. But it could have very easily been another division for the SEC and the Big Ten, which would have been really, really interesting. Now, some of these some of these, a lot of these analysts that are working with the TV networks and things and the conferences to figure out what TV value is. The latest thing that they're coming out with is that they think that there's going to be 2 24 leagues and 2 24-member leagues and 1 20-team super conference league, which would mean that there would be 64 teams. Now, there are currently 70-some teams. Well, we eliminated, 2 basically and relegated 2 so far. So I think it was 72. Was it 78 teams that were in the P5? I think it was something like 78 teams. So we lost 2, right? So let's say it's 76. We still got to get to 64. So this really is going to be an arms race, if this is true, for the Big 12 and the ACC. And I think what you're seeing right now is the opening shots by FSU and Clemson, and that the decision's already been made which one to axe. And I think it's going to be the ACC. So it's really interesting stuff. It's actually, all of this moved pretty rapidly if you think about it. This is all within a year and a half. And
I still think it's going to end up to be 2.
I don't think they have enough for the TV contracts to be able to do that. And I think if it was only the 2, you'd be losing 49.1 million fans.
No, I think they're going to take some. I think they're going. Ultimately, I think what's going to happen is it's going to become 2 conferences. I think they're going to try to cherry pick the best of the ACC, the Big Ten, and the SEC, and then cherry pick the best of the Big 12. I think that's ultimately what they're going to do. I think they could try to weed out some of the SEC or Big Ten teams, but I think those brands are kind of big. Yeah, but I think it's going to be 2 conferences, or even if it's 1 conference, I think they're going to get to 64 teams somehow. It's going to be a 232, however you want to do it. It's 64 teams, however you want to split it.
232 team divisions is what you're saying?
I think they're going to split it to 64 teams. I think it's going to be 64 power teams, super conference. How they get there and what they call it, I don't know. I think we're going to do away with like Pac-12 and SEC. I think it's just going to.
Well, the Pac-12 is already gone.
But I mean, like just like the regional titles that we have, I think they're going to do away with it because the Big Ten isn't Southern California. You know, that's never been the case. That's not, but they're in the Big Ten. I just think they're not going to call it that anymore. I think they're going to try to get the best. 64.
So I wasn't planning on going down this road, but right now, with everything that we know right now, is UCF in the 64?
Before we go there, I'm just curious, and I'm sorry if you said it, Roger.
I said a lot, so I may have.
You may not even know if you said it after
yeah,
that.
I know exactly.
How did they get to 64 again? What was the point? Why do 2 things have 24 and another one have 20?
This is
those numbers come from?
This is coming from there's several different advisory companies that are out there, right? So that are independents, right? And one of them was one of the ones that there's Navigate and it starts with a B. I can't remember what it's called. But anyway, there's multiple different companies out there that advise and say, okay, how do you optimize? They advise both. They work with the TV networks and they work with the conferences to maximize their conference revenue, right? And these guys are in the know. They're in the middle of the negotiations with the conferences and ESPN and Fox and everybody else that's involved. And they are now saying that they are predicting that it will be a 64 team with 2 24-team leagues and 1 20-team league.
And are they saying those numbers because they've identified all 64 teams and we are just guessing who's in the 64? Or are they saying that because of some sort of regionality or just?
No, they're saying based on the metrics and the dollars involved that what they're predicting for it to happen and what would be the most revenue would be 64 total. And the way to get there would be 2 24-team leagues with the Big 10 and the SEC going to 24, and then the Big 12 most likely going to 20 teams. So it'll either be the Big 12 or the ACC, more likely the Big 12, because The ACC does represent more fans today, but they also have more schools. They also have smaller fan bases even than what we do in the Big 12 per school in the ACC than what we do. So the idea is that they will pick from the ACC, consolidate them in the Big 12, and there'll be 3 super conferences, with obviously the SEC and the Big 10 having a higher share of those revenue dollars, but an average of around $50 million per team in TV revenue in that third bucket.
Here's my thing. Like, why, if you're the SEC and Big 10, why would you just cherry pick from the ACC and let the Big 12 have the rest, when you could cherry pick from the ACC, cherry pick from the Big 12, and take the best of the rest, and just take the rest of the revenue? Like, why even keep the Big 12?
Think about it. So they've already kind of cherry picked the Big 12. They pulled apart the Pac-12. They took Texas and OU, right? And these are things that are not easy. You've got things to negotiate. It's not just like a drop of a hat. You got to negotiate buyouts. You got to get people on schedules. You got to do all that stuff. So it's going to take some time to do that. Now, if the ACC completely falls apart, the next two on the horizon, obviously, is Clemson and FSU, right? And again, not everybody got full shares, right? So think about the difference even between what Oregon got versus what Washington got.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? Versus what USC got versus what UCLA got. Plus, you've got the states to deal with. Although the state of California, didn't stop it like they were hoping, right? But they did get their pound of flesh for the remaining schools from that for the state university system. So those are all negotiations that have to happen each time some of these schools leave. Now, if you look at the Big 12 versus the ACC, if the ACC comes apart at the seams, which one is the easier one to start pulling schools from?
Oh,
right?
Of course, the ACC.
And what are the next biggest brands that are up? They're in the ACC. You've got the FSU, Clemson. Let's assume they're gone. You've got Virginia and North Carolina. Those are the next two up.
Are we talking strictly football? Just to make sure.
These are all football-driven decisions.
Okay, yeah. Then it'd be
probably
probably UM and Virginia.
It would not be UM. It would be Virginia and UNC would be the next two. Then what?
What is Virginia?
Virginia,
Virginia is not a football.
We're talking about fan base sizes and TV revenue dollars. Miami has not.
Yeah,
you look at their stadium.
I don't know about the revenue.
Miami does not have the butts and seats. They're a very fickle fan base, and their viewing, as far as the number of people that are viewing their games, comparatively speaking, has been really low, and they've hurt themselves because they haven't done anything for a decade. So, now that they're looking at all of these things, that's what they're looking. And the other part is all the other revenue sports. So North Carolina, for example, does really good in the other revenue sports. Virginia does really good in or Olympic sports. And you remember the Big Ten specifically likes that. And then it's the school size and the research dollars. Miami does not draw in any research dollars, right? They're a private school. They're a small school. They're not out there competing. They may bring some in. I assume they do, right? Especially on the medical side, because that's kind of what they're known for, is that in international relations. But they're not like a UCF or North Carolina. That's a large public university that's going to be bringing state research dollars in. So those are all things that are being considered.
Would you think Duke? Why wouldn't Duke come up in those conversations over Virginia? In my opinion,
over Virginia, because they have and I'm just going to say this way, we're E for everyone. They have a doo-doo football history recently. Yes, they beat us in the 2 years in a row, right?
But way more than Virginia over the last 5 years.
But I'm just trying to, even when I was in school, I don't remember Virginia being this powerhouse football. Now, Duke was horrible. I'm not gonna lie, Duke was horrible. But if we're talking the rest of the sports, that basketball brand carries itself.
Yeah, you said the word recently when you talked about Duke football, but they've been ranked way more than Virginia in the last 5 years.
I don't know the
recent history. Virginia is horrible compared to Duke.
Hold on. We're talking 10 years. Duke has done good in the last 2 or 3 years. That's it.
Right.
On top of that, I don't know if you've ever been to their campus, but I have. And Duke Stadium is like 32 to 35,000, right? That's smaller than ours. And they don't fill it.
Oh, yeah.
Virginia, on the other hand, I think is somewhere 55 to 65,000, and they fill it.
But if you were to
the
choose
fan base size and the viewing numbers are just completely different. The only thing Duke has for viewing numbers is basketball. That's it.
But I'm saying, well. So if we're going to choose, like, why would you choose Virginia if they're not really bringing anything to football? That's what
they are. They're bringing fan base and the size of the fan base. They're bringing in butts and seats. How many people are viewing them on TV? And they are the school for the DMV.
Oh, I mean, yeah, I guess
more so than Virginia Tech, huh?
Virginia Tech and Virginia are about the same, but Virginia Tech isn't worth as much academically as what Virginia is. And North Carolina is a very highly ranked.
I know
school.
North Carolina definitely is.
Yeah.
I have no qualms with North Carolina. I don't know. I don't see Virginia per se as a needle mover, in my opinion. Like, if they're not really they add value in a sense, but to me, that's like like Mississippi State. That's like Vanderbilt. Like, these guys really aren't competing.
They're prestigious. They're prestigious universities that are highly ranked that bring a lot of research dollars in.
That's a Big Ten.
Okay, so that's that's a Big Ten school. That's how I saw Duke. If Duke were to come, I'd see them more Big Ten than SEC. Like, that's how I see it. But I don't know.
Welcome to ACC talk
back to the original question: is UCF in that 64 today? Yes or no?
I personally think that UCF is, for all the reasons why they're in the Big 12 right now. Like, the reasons why we're in the Big 12 right now is because we reside in a large market. We're an up-and-coming athletic program that has had a lot of relevance in the last decade plus, and we have a young alumni base that is only going to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and the fans are I think we're even viewed nationally, I would imagine, in these types of conversations, while we're still probably viewed as, that team that claimed the national championship or whatever you want to, those high elites want to call us. But like, I think we're viewed equally as that kind of team, or I should say that fan base, alumni base, the team, the athletic program that is very much on the rise, and you would rather have them in the club as opposed to outside of the club, because the benefit that UCF has in the 64, I think, outweighs like any downside that they would have from being in there. I don't think there's enough reasons to keep us out, and it is obviously a biased, opinion, but like, I just think the main reasons why we were allowed in the first place, like it essentially applies to this expansion as well.
To your point, Ben, I think that we are one of the teams that was promoted but accepted more so than some of the other teams were, especially like when you look at how SMU was treated. I feel like we are looked at as a legitimate add and a value add to the conference, where some of the other schools weren't. Houston now, they're a basketball ad, which is good for the Big 12. But if you try to add Houston anywhere else, even when we were talking about 2016, supposedly they were ranked below us, and that was a Texas-centric conference at that time. So I just feel nationally we've just kind of been embraced in a way that a lot of the other new ads just haven't. And like BYU and Cincinnati have been around a really, really long time. BYU is always going to have their place. but they're not looked at as like they're ever going to break through that ceiling. And I think Cincinnati's just kind of looked at, okay, they're not ever going to be a consistently good team, where I think UCF, I feel like, has that potential and thus has been accepted as a worthy P5 ad. That's just how I look at it. And the narrative, both in the media and with the fans, that I've interacted with or seen, whether it be Reddit or anywhere else, they all seem to accept UCF as legitimate.
Yeah, I think we're also, I think to our benefit, Florida and FSU haven't kind of solidified themselves as like the brand in Florida, whereas you talk about Houston, they're never going to eclipse Texas. Right. They're never going to eclipse A&M. You talk about Cincinnati, they'll never eclipse Ohio State. That those schools that they're trying to fight with, they'll never do it. Like, it could be 100.
They have a ceiling.
Yeah. Whereas I don't think people hold Florida and Florida State in the regard of a Texas, in the regard of Ohio State. I think it's in a tier or maybe even two below, which I think brings us closer, which allows us to, like, I think we're kind of in that same realm. If you want to say FSU and Florida better, like, I have no qualms. I disagree, but I don't think it's some huge gap like it might have been 15 years ago. I think that's the thing.
Yeah, I think on that same line of thinking, though, Trey, I think that we have the benefit in Florida versus those states that you just talked about, where we actually have what in the past was an established Big Three. Yeah. And what we have done over the last decade plus at UCF is we have continued to rise consistently, to use your word, Roger, like consistently throughout like all aspects of our athletic program and our university. Yeah. And Miami is flat at best. Declining is probably more likely. And because we were able to, it actually isn't much about FSU and Florida because they're nationally accepted, but like because we're like now in the Big Three in the sense that we've kind of passed Miami already.
Pick Miami out of that
and it looks like for the future we're just going to continue to put some distance between the two of us. It's like we're in a club that's important in our own state, so nationally you can start to wrap your head around like they're kind of in the club in general, nationally, because we've done it in our own state. And because Miami is just
I think that we underachieved based on our own expectations, and we talked about expectations during both basketball and football season, right? But ultimately, I think nationally, the viewing point is we didn't get embarrassed. We stepped right into a P5 conference and we competed in basketball, even though none of us were expecting that. But we were relevant throughout the year. Football, it was touch and go there for a while. There were some weird ones like Baylor, right? But we were there and were respected football wise. You know what I mean? And I do still think we have some from those 2017, 2018, 2019 teams. We're looked at as good in football, right? And we haven't embarrassed ourselves yet. Although I was kind of embarrassed during the Military Bowl against Duke, but I was there for that. But outside of that, I think from our internal expectations versus external expectations, I think nationally, we're like, okay, they can handle this. They moved up. They didn't get embarrassed. And things like, you talk about Gus Malzahn on the hot seat and all that stuff that has been mentioned in a few games past. Trey, you were talking about that. Things like us being so high in the recruiting rankings and all of that other stuff, we're looked at as legitimate, where Miami has been the offseason champs for so long in recruiting and have done nothing with it. It's almost turned into a meme for them in that it's a negative branding connotation because, hey, they're going to throw money at everybody, but they're not going to achieve anything during the season. So I do think that that's the case. And it's also helped with FSU, for a while there, they were mediocre as well. So, all right, Josh, what do you think?
Yeah, at this point, I don't even know what to think anymore. I'm not even going to lie. I really don't. everything is so crazy amongst football. I got nothing more to say. I'm gonna stop it right there.
Josh, yes or no?
Is UCF a fringe? Are they a top 64?
I want to say yes. But I've been a fan since the 90s, the late 90s, and I see where this thing has happened for us, right? I've seen us like get the rug pulled out from under us so many times. Trey should have been in a CFP playoff, but no.
All right.
Alan, the next year when we were undefeated,
I thought you didn't. You said you didn't have anything to say about it.
You know,
you goaded me. Keep going.
You goaded me. Here's the thing. So the UCF fan of me from the 90s and 2000s, and I'd say early 2010s, like the one that saw us beat Marshall the end of 17-game losing streak, is like, no, they're not going to let us in. But we see little glimpses, and those little glimpses look good. You know, Trey was on one of those teams, which didn't look good a couple of years earlier, but you need that time to grow, right? Even the year before in that Cure Bowl, but we've seen glimpses relatively recently, like just shellacking Oklahoma State. So I think the answer should be yes, but the old school UCF fan in me is like, hey, here it comes again. We're just going to get the rug pulled out from under them. So the answer, it should be yes.
All right, but
we'll
your
see
answer
what happens.
Is yes or no? Today, right now, are they included? Yes or no?
Should be.
I didn't say should be. Yes or no. It's binary, Josh.
Yes.
Okay, there we go.
Yes with a question.
All right, Alan.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, yes, I think if the NCAA or whatever, who the powers be are smart, yeah, they would include an up-and-coming school that has so much upside and
sleeping giant.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I think they are included. I mean, there's so many useless Power 5 programs that are just in there because they were in the right location at the right time 100 years ago or whatever. But I mean, I think UCF is going to be included in the big time in some way, shape, or form. Like, I think when I think of the big time, I think of just that they can play for the main national championship. So yes, I think whatever that future looks like, they'll be eligible to play for the top prize in college football whenever that time comes.
See,
All right.
I can agree to. I think
well, that wasn't the question, Josh.
I know, but that I can.
But yeah, my answer is yes to your original question. But that's what I would look at, is maybe the money isn't going to be the same as Alabama, but if you're able and can realistically get into the top prize, then that's what matters most.
Well,
all right. So,
hold on one moment. Maybe that's part of the other side of what this all in for this coming year might be too, because I know it's probably Gus Malzahn going, well, if we do really well, there's potential other opportunities, right? Maybe part of it, and the NIL and all that on top of everything else, is if we get a sniff or a possibility of getting close to a playoff now, then that, we have this 1 or 2 or maybe 3 years to like really solidify. It's not just 2013. It's not just 2017. It's 2024 too. And you can't keep us out. Maybe that's part of where all this push is going.
All right. So I'm going to answer this, and I'm going to answer this simply. Today, no. The only reason we'd be included is if they didn't shuffle. If they shuffled the deck and they picked the teams today, I would say no. If they were picking them from the ACC and the Big 12. If they merged the best of the ACC that's left over with the Big 12, then yes, obviously we'd be included. But if they were just picking 64 today, we would not be included. I do, however, to your point, Josh, and this was the point I was going to make, is that we are now on the clock to continue that brand building, right? So for me, we are the middle of the P5, if that makes any sense. Our job is to get to the top of the middle of the P5. in the ensuing years. And if we do that, I think we would be included. Today, no, we don't. Today, no. If the question was 64 teams today, no, I don't think we'd be picked in the draft.
And that
So you
point
think
is
these next few years are like this upcoming year and the next year are important?
Yes, it's prove it years. If realignment, if let's say they FSU and Clemson situations figured out by this next football season, we have probably 2 more football seasons before we come up in the draft and could potentially be done that way. However, I do agree that it's not that easy. So they're just going to merge the leftover ACC teams into the Big 12 to get to that 20 in the interim step. So I think within 10 years that may change again. But I think so for the short term, I think we're safe. But long term, we've got some work to do to make sure we're the top of the middle of the pack consistently.
And that point is based in the assumption that the current SEC and Big Ten schools are completely safe. So the only schools that are not safe in this new line of thinking are ACC and Big 12 schools. Is that opinion based in that assumption?
Correct. Because if we blew it all up, right, and we just said, hey, let's start from scratch. Hey, Vanderbilt, you're not there, bro.
I mean, Northwestern,
Wake Forest,
you just got so many.
Wake Forest, Northwestern, Duke might be included for basketball, but that would be the only thing there. Would Baylor be included? Probably not. Small school, not a big fan base, whatever. They've done well with what they've had recently, but they were bad for a very long time. BYU, probably included. Cincinnati, borderline, right? West Virginia, probably included, but they're sliding down the scale too because their academics are not great. And, their athletics, it's kind of like like West Virginia to me, although we haven't done well against them lately, right? But West Virginia to me is kind of like what ECU was when we joined in Conference USA, right? They were coming off great years. But as Conference USA gave way to the AC, ECU got left behind and their program's kind of fallen apart. I see that future for West Virginia. So, from the ACC schools, like I said, you think about Wake Forest. Nope. You think about even on the Big Ten, Purdue. Is that really going to make it?
No.
They've got great baseball, but are they going to make it? Probably not.
Well,
So if you really
Northwestern, probably not.
Championship game.
So here's the homework. Why don't you guys, if you blew it up, right, do your ranking of 64 teams that you would pick within a draft for next week, and then say
just football or just entirety?
Just entire athletic departments, right?
Pick I give the homework here.
Pick the 64, and then tell me again next week if you picked it that way, would UCF be included today as it stands today or not? I'm interested to hear what your answers are. All right, I'm going to save the Super League that was floated. That was a real proposition that was including North Carolina. The AD for North Carolina was behind it. I'm going to save that for next week. In that scenario, it'd be 80 teams and UCF as a permanent member. So continuing that power status. So we'll talk about that a little next week. Let's move on to basketball. We did have some.
One question really quickly, though. So just to make sure.
One more thing, Ben.
One more thing.
These next few seasons for football, like on a scale of 1 to 10 of importance, how important are they? Like the next 2 years?
2 years?
I mean, with 2027 right around the corner, what Josh is saying is probably the.
Well, it depends if you're talking about for the conference or for UCF. If you're talking about for the conference, is extremely important, right? I'd say a 9, right? For UCF, I'd say it's probably about a 7. We want
like just like standing within, like if these next few years of football success determine whether we're a lock top 64 or fall out. Like, do you think that's like a 9?
That's a 10. If that's the scenario you're painting.
Gus Malzahn on the hot seat, baby. That's what I heard.
Wait, what? Whoa! You heard?
That's what you're telling me.
Is that what you're saying? Or
if it's a 10 of importance,
that's like I said, I don't think that timing is right now. I think we still got 2 or 3 years to kind of prove it for UCF. But you painted a very specific scenario. I think that's more important for the conference for the 2027 year. Because like I said, if the ACC is going to lose Clemson and FSU, that's going to happen. And it does happen before the football season that's announced. There's still going to be a year or two before they get turned over and go to their new homes, right? And then you've got Virginia Tech, North Carolina, and everything else. After they leave, then we're on the clock. So that's really like I said, within 4 to 5 years, I think is where we've kind of pull a U-turn and establish ourselves as kind of the top tier of the Big 12.
Gotcha. Makes sense.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
All right. Now that Ben's done with his one more thing, Ben, I'm going to turn the mic over. I know, I'm joking because it's usually you who does that. All right. So you've even got your own banner for that. All right. So I'm going to turn it over to you and talk a little bit about this new basketball transfer. We had some good news in basketball. So why don't you talk to us a little bit about Keyshawn Hall?
Yeah, a few weeks ago, the sky is falling because we had nothing to talk about but transfers out, but that was the only thing that we could talk about because the transfer portal hadn't officially opened for this portion of the year, which is you get a decent amount of football players to talk about, but certainly basketball, it's the hottest transfer portal season since it follows after March Madness is over. And so we're starting to gain some players in the portal, and Keyshawn Hall is our latest transfer portal get. He is a 6'8", 250-pound guard from George Mason. He started out his freshman season at UNLV. He was a pretty highly recruited player, I believe, but he started out at UNLV. He played in a decent amount of games. He averaged about 10 minutes a game at UNLV, but he decided for whatever reason to transfer to George Mason, probably just saw some opportunity to play in a certain system or just be able to get more playing time in general. And he bumped that up to – not only did he bump that up to 30 minutes a game as a sophomore at George Mason, but like basically every statistical category, he doubled and tripled his averages. He went from, averaging 5.5 points at UNLV to 16.6 points at George Mason. One of the things that really intrigued me about his stats is that he averaged over 8 rebounds a game, as a guy that kind of plays that 2 or 3 spot in the offense. He's somebody who really likes to mix it up. I mean, 8 rebounds a game is kind of a big deal. I mean, especially in college basketball, just to give you context. I mean, when you think about some of the rebounds that we were getting, some of the rebounders on our team, I should say, some of the big men on our team, Diallo led our UCF team last season with 5.6 rebounds a game last year. And so, and Keyshawn Hall averaged over 8 rebounds from the guard spot, along with over 16 points. He also shot 35% from the 3-point line. He was somebody that when he entered the transfer portal after his sophomore season at George Mason was very, very highly regarded, very highly recruited. He wound up choosing UCF over Arkansas, USC, and Michigan State. Those are all pretty high-level programs. And so, with Cal being at Arkansas right now, and then it seemed to be really kind of leaning towards USC, and he wound up choosing UCF. And so he could be an immediate impact player for us. It's as we've talked about a lot over the last couple of weeks and on this show. I mean, you don't know exactly how a player's skill set is going to translate from one program to the next. But as far as not only statistically, but just looking at some of his highlight reels, he's an impressive player, and so hopefully he's an impressive player for UCF.
Awesome. So, one of the things we talked about before we started the show, we've got a lot of guards kind of lined up, right? We got Mike Williams, we got DJ, we got Sellers. I thought we would see him as a 3. What's your assessment on how he fits into the rotation as it's constructed today?
Yeah, I think that he's definitely going to fit into that 3 spot. Maybe even some sort of 4 guard lineup and have him in the 4 spot. If you're going a smaller lineup, especially his desire to mix it up in the paint. I really think that he'll allow some versatility in matchups and lineups for Coach Dawkins to kind of take advantage of certain, hopefully matchup problems that he could create. But yeah, I could see him more than likely just in general being in that 3 spot if he was in a starting lineup. And we'll see in the next couple of weeks here who else we can acquire in the transfer portal, because obviously we are rather thin on the front line when it comes to
6 players.
Yeah,
we had 6 players, dude.
Well, yeah, we had 6 players at one point, but also it's just a matter. To me, I'm really curious to see. And you just mentioned it, Roger. We're not looking too bad from a guard standpoint going into next season so far, but the amount of holes that we have not filled on the front line. I mean, the big man department needs to certainly we need to acquire some guys that can mix it up down low. So we'll have to see. It's kind of like to me, it's like we're a little bit worried about depth at wide receiver and on the football team, and we're certainly worried about depth at the forward and center position on the basketball team. I think that's where we need to really focus all of our energy on moving forward.
Yeah, that was it's certainly interesting too, because we did up our NIL game this offseason. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of quality of a player that we can attract, and hopefully we're not going to end up kind of like we did last year where Joey Hart left and we're trying to backfill some of those players at the last minute. Interestingly enough, TCU lost a player to the portal this week. This past.
Yeah. He was hardly there, right? I don't know exactly what happened there, but CJ Walker, decided to decommit to TCU a week after he committed to them. So
yeah, sounds like the McDonald's bag didn't contain the Big Mac, so it might have had a cheeseburger, no pickles.
Yeah,
so
I'm sure he's going to get paid by some program, and that's fine. It'd be interesting to see if all of a sudden that just circles back right to UCF. I don't. That's with no inside knowledge whatsoever, but it would be rather interesting if CJ decided to finish out at UCF.
What's interesting for me is, this is his bag year. I mean, he's been injured quite a bit, and you don't know. CJ has twice gone and got evaluated for the draft. And this season was not what he hoped it would be. I mean, he played well and he showed a lot of different things, but again, was injured. So, it'll be interesting to see. I feel like he tries to maximize his bag year this year. And because I would bet that he was told that he's probably going to go to the Euro League or something like that, and not make the NBA draft, unfortunately. Whereas before, you remember a couple of years ago, he was listed pretty high on people's draft boards.
Yeah, coming out of high school, he was a 5-star recruit. He was considered to be a one and done when he went to Oregon, and it just never worked out, never materialized for that type of level of player that you needed to be to make the NBA draft. But it's certainly a 5-star recruit coming out of high school. So yeah, we'll have to see what happens there. But
a little bit of good news this week. We did miss on Jalen Sellers was heavily recruiting his Ball State compatriot that played on the team that he came from, who transferred somewhere else. So Johnny Dawkins, I mean, you see it all the time. He's definitely putting our name in the hat for everything. And it's still interesting because that contract issue hasn't publicly been resolved. So
Right.
it's interesting to see how this season will go. All right. That's it for basketball this week. So let's talk a little UCF baseball. Trey, do you want to talk about baseball this week? We all know that you've got a heater.
Softball.
So do you have? Well, you talk about
I'm the
baseball too.
softball
You're a
guy.
big baseball fan.
I mean, from what I know, from what you got, I didn't really watch too much baseball this weekend because I was watching the softball.
All right, so that's me.
Yeah. So yeah, let Josh do it. I'll talk about softball.
All right, Josh.
Softball is tough too. Well, baseball, this week in baseball was like really amazing for 2 out of 3 games. And then one game,
home run derby.
One game was like, we didn't even do text talk. And my text talk was all about that. Like how we had like an inning or so to get from 6 to 8 home runs to tie the record of home runs in a game. And amazingly, we did it. I think it was just 1 inning we had to do it. And I watched a little bit more of those last 2 games because I was solo parenting this weekend. And so I got to watch them with my daughter. That was kind of cool. We also then turned on the softball game, but we'll go back to that. And yeah, so on Friday, I didn't have a chance to take a look. And what I usually do, I go to all the UCF stuff that all of you go to, all of the listeners go to, and I was not a single dad. Come on. No, my wife had a wonderful beach vacation, which was awesome because she needed to do that. And so, yeah, I go and I look at the score, and it's a 2-0 shutout, and I go, what? Central Michigan's pitcher pitched like 133 pitches. I think it was a complete game shutout. I mean, that just didn't
had an 8 ERA coming into this game. By the way.
7.9 ERA, and so that dropped us like 7 RPI points, and it was not great. And then like the cannons unleashed, and I don't know what was missing on Friday, but I think it was 17 runs on Saturday and 23 on Sunday. It was a deluge.
23-3.
20, yeah, it was a 20-point win. It was amazing. Like watching that game, you're like, they can't keep getting hit like over and over and over again, like 4 home runs in an inning, and it didn't stop there. So the baseball team minus, I'll say, that's why you play the game, right? There's some all of us have probably either played in a sport or have watched someone play a sport where you're like, there's no way they're winning that game. Fairleigh Dickinson in the NCAA tournament, a couple of years back. So there's a lot of Cinderella type of stories there. That might have been just like the one-off game where it would have been nice to squeak out something, but nah. Which is not great.
Well, it's more than that, Josh. Let's be real. We dropped 27 to 27 on RPI, and the problem with that is not just that. It's the fact that the teams that we have left on the schedule are not high RPI teams, and some of the teams that we played that were higher RPI are now no longer RPI. Yeah. Texas dropped down into the 80s. The Cows got swept by Rice or somebody this weekend.
I think it was Rice.
Yeah. So, their RPI is tanking. So it's not just our performance, but it's also the potential that we have for RPI teams that we have left on the schedule. And, the big number typically for you to get into the postseason as an at-large is 40 wins. So there's not a lot of room for error left after losing that game and dropping West Virginia. So we went very quickly from potentially hosting to potentially not making the NCAAs unless we win the Big 12 conference.
I mean, I know West Virginia that was all
games,
but yes, I know, but I just my gut, as much as I said earlier that the defeatist UCF fan of me is like, we were going to get the rug pulled out from us. I feel like this baseball team has with Sundin probably coming back. I think I read that in this coming series. I think we have what it takes to make it to the tournament, but we're going to be in Tallahassee or Gainesville or something. We're not going to be in Orlando.
We're projecting Gainesville, I think. But
Yeah.
the crazy thing is Florida hasn't played all that great this season either.
Yeah, I don't get that
We've
either.
won 5 straight against them, so
yeah. Listen, hey, that's what it is, but I think that's definitely, unless we like go on a streak and win every single series and win the tournament, the Big 12 tournament, it's probably not happening. On the hosting, I'm pretty certain that's not going to happen. But there's still a shot. But I still feel like we get to the tournament. Hopefully, I'm right.
All right, so real quick, we're going to do a wow. I just realized Nobra had to leave a little early, and he was not changing the banners for our sections here. So apparently, we're still talking about UCF Football Talk. So we'll go to college football updates real quick for the viewers, and we went through hoops, and we went through UCF baseball, and now let's go for a real quick student re-education. And this week, something popped up that most students don't remember, and Nobra probably will miss out on this week until he listens back and edits the video. But UCF did play the Moscow Bears in 1992. That came up. Someone on Twitter put together a list that was like the weirdest teams that Big 12 teams have played. We did that. If for the history buffs and most of you that all the players now weren't born in 92. But that was immediately after the fall of the Berlin Wall and the collapse of the Soviet Union. UCF did end up winning that game 42-6. They were 6-4 that season. And the reason we played the Moscow Bears was because Savannah State, who was a team we used to play back then, actually couldn't make the game. So our makeup game at the Citrus Bowl was against the Moscow Bears, which we won 42-6. So as far as I know, we are the only team to beat Russia in football. So America. All right. With that being said, let's go ahead and move on. Alan does not have an oxymoronic stat of the week for us. It's not football season. So we're going to leave that in there.
Or basketball. He said basketball.
Well, he wrote in the show notes, it's not football season, and we don't have a boxing team. So he does not have a fun fact of the week. However, Josh is going to save us with his sometimes funny fact of the week.
And we are talking about the doldrums of relatively sportless UCF. So I need to pull something out of the bag for this one. So here's a question for you. This Roger lookalike, Grammy Award-winning former UCF student, is curating his own stage at Stagecoach this weekend. What is his name? The stage name is fine.
Former UCF student. Ooh. So I'm guessing he's the younger version of me.
Similar age. Close.
Really?
Close. And heritage, actually.
Is it German?
Partially.
Oh boy, just like me. All right, my doppelganger, who apparently is a lot more successful than I am because I'm doing this podcast and not going on doing the Stagecoach. As much as I love you guys, I have no idea. I had some ideas of former UCF students that were musicians, but they're all younger than me, so I don't know. I'll have to pass on this one. I don't even have a guess.
Anyone?
Stagecoach isn't just music, isn't there other acts at Stagecoach, or is it just music?
I think it's mostly music. So if you're not familiar, Stagecoach is like the country version of Coachella that happens out in the Coachella Valley afterwards. Like,
I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Trey, you're a country guy.
I'm definitely a big country
I just
fan.
know
I have
country
no idea
roads take me home. That's about all I country I know.
Oh boy, you're
I'm
right.
a huge country fan, but I didn't realize that even a semi-big country star went to UCF. So,
All right, Alan, we know you're a big country fan.
Morgan Whalen.
But amazingly still headlining Stagecoach despite throwing cheers off balconies in Nashville.
No, I do like country. I didn't realize there was a big country star that went to UCF. No idea.
All right.
So this is a little bit of an interesting thing because he's not traditionally known more for country music, although he's been at Stagecoach for 4 straight years. He's more known for electronic music.
What is tronic?
His name is Diplo.
Diplo.
Oh,
Diplo went to UCF?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
He went to UCF when I went to UCF in 1997. He stayed here for like a semester or 2. He was on WPRK, if I remember correctly. He then moved to Temple. So, yeah, he went to UCF in 97. He was a DJ at WPRK at Rollins College. And UCF, the reason you do that is because you have a radio station that plays jazz. And former DJs at radio stations don't want to spend 2 years before you get out of the newsroom, like me. So I should have went to WPRK because I was a FCC licensed DJ in the 90s. Probably Diplo was too. And he moved to Temple in Philadelphia. And he started DJing when he was about 20. But yeah, he was a UCF student for I think a year or so. And he actually has talked about like growing up and DJing at Rollins College and playing whatever the heck he wants because no one was listening to him, and some other stuff too. So yeah,
that's interesting because I like Diplo, and he does some collabos with Skrillex and a few other people and Marshmello and a bunch of folks in the EDM scene. So.
Look, and if you look at his photos of him like 10 years ago or so, you guys have a pretty similar appearance. I'm not going to lie.
I didn't know we looked alike. I don't even know what he looks like, to be honest.
I don't either. I know he is.
I think he is also partially German, if I remember. That's part of his background too.
But I looked at Diplo is a little too close to Duplo, so I guess that makes sense. And for those that have German heritage and know what Duplos are, they're super yummy.
Yeah, it's Thomas Wesley Pence. But yeah, I think he does have some German background in him as well. But anyway, yeah, I'm shocked. Well, I tried to do a little switcheroo because he's been a Stagecoach and he is an a country ego, if you will, or whatever, called Thomas Wesley, which is his first and middle name. So, and he actually is curating a whole area of Stagecoach, which is really intriguing. But Indio, California, Coachella, Stagecoach, Diplo, former UCF student, is hanging out there with Morgan Wallen and Dwight Yoakam, Clint Black. I guess Post Malone's going to be there. So anyway, yeah.
All right. So Diplo, Meek Mill. There's actually a few people that have UCF ties, but when you said country, Sheryl Crow, I was thinking about a lot, or Plies, Plies.
Meek Mill? Yeah, I was about to search that. I didn't know that one.
Well, he didn't go here, but he's a big supporter of UCF.
Yeah. That I do know. Also, we had Jose who did some rapping down in
R.I.P. for Jose.
R.I.P.
Yeah. All right. That was a big lineman. Let me tell you. You would not want to line up against him. All right. Thank you for that, Josh. I learned something this week about Diplo, so that's awesome. I had no idea, and you stumped the panel. So, all right. So let's go ahead and round everything out. But before we do that, I'm going to let. Since Trey watched softball all weekend, I mean, there isn't anything really exciting to say, but what do you want to say about softball?
No, I mean, it's just up and down season, man. We play well against some teams, and Baylor, they're a below average team in the conference, and we get swept. We lost all the game by 1 run. We couldn't hit.
We had 2 runs all season. The pitching was great. We had all series. We had 2 runs. Yeah. The hitting has been hit and miss. We went on a run where we had really good hitting, and then we ran into Baylor, and it did not work out so well.
Yep. And next week we have this weekend we have Oklahoma. They're not as great as they were, but when you are 61-1, there's really nowhere else to go but down. So I mean, I think right now they've only lost.
Well,
4
hold
games.
on now. Before that, we do have Bethune-Cookman up next, so there's hope.
Yeah. We need to get some good energy going into this year.
And we did beat FAU 1-0. But let me say this about that: the pitching has been stellar all season long.
Yeah.
So,
but that's kind of the trend going into the Big 12 is a lot of great pitching teams, a lot of great defensive teams with Texas, Oklahoma, a lot of the teams.
Which is crazy because we played a lot of good teams the last couple of years. Jada Cody did set records for the triple for triples at UCF, but her season just has not panned out as we thought it would.
And what's crazy, she's playing, like, if you look at the numbers, has good numbers. Again, I think it's different playing teams, maybe a midweek game versus seeing them 3 games in a row. I think just so much more game planning, so much more strategy goes behind it. So once you go and you play Texas, you play Oklahoma, you play Baylor's, we could beat them, in the game one game in the middle of the week on a Wednesday night. Yeah, you could get those wins, but when you playing them Friday, Saturday, Sunday, or Thursday, Friday, Saturday, it's much harder.
All right. So we'll leave it at that. So hopefully we'll see a big win against BCU, and we do well against Oklahoma, because I think we play Oklahoma at home this time, right?
Yeah. I think this is senior night for the girls. So.
All right. So make sure you support them if you can make it out there. It's still a great time. They play well. It's just not the special season this year, and primarily because of the hitting. All right. Let's move on to the quick update on other UCF sports that Alan does not watch.
So on the sports that Alan doesn't watch, he doesn't watch women's tennis. And since Alan doesn't watch women's tennis, he doesn't know.
Guys, don't lie.
He doesn't know that they won the first round of the Big 12 tournament versus Kansas 4-3. They were eliminated versus number 1 Oklahoma State. They finally beat us in a sport. Actually, they beat us.
They beat us. They beat us before in women's sports, including women's tennis early in the season.
I was just let me do my thing. And honestly, something I actually was paying attention to, like we got the first match, and once we got to doubles, we just got floored in doubles. We had actually 3 other matches that were getting close to possibly being a potential win, but then it just kind of the wheels fell off. Now men's tennis, this might be the first time we've lost to Ohio State, Oklahoma State in a men's sport. We lost to them 4-3 in the Big Ten tournament, but Alan wouldn't know that because he doesn't watch it.
Actually, I wrote the show notes, so I do know all of this.
Listen, play with the bit.
That's perfect.
Stick to the bit. Is next. Well, I said you didn't watch it, but you do. Yeah, sure. UCF softball, as Trey said, they beat FAU 1-0, and they were swept by Baylor. As Roger was saying earlier, they're playing Bethune-Cookman University next, and then against a kind of good team in Oklahoma.
All right. Well, thank you for that update, and thank you, Alan, for that comedic relief. That was hilarious. I think I laughed as hard as Trey did last week at the end of the show. Which, for those of you that have not done this, go ahead. It's like 10 seconds left, and record on slow Trey laughing. It's hilarious. I laughed at it all week, and I sent it to the guys. So thank you guys for braving through. We managed. We were planning on a short show. We were like, oh, there's not much to talk about. Man. And we are now 2 hours and 3 minutes into the show. So thank you.
Ain't no short man.
Wow. Nope, okay. B. Josh even put it in there. So for right now, I do want to say thank you for that compliment. And we're going to have a great week where we've got some interviews coming up. And we'll talk about the 80 team construct that was actually floated and was an actual construct that was presented. Unfortunately not taken advantage of right now, but something we'll talk about next week. So thanks, guys. Have a great week. Go Knights, and
charge on.
See, Trey, you need to get that fish out of the blur, because that's a nice nice big fish